I want to ask you to Mark chapter 10, if you would. Mark chapter 10. Sometimes on Sundays, I will think about what it was like for you to leave earlier this morning and come here. For some of you, it is almost kind of an automatic thing. This is what you do on Sundays, and you're here. In fact, you've got your spot marked out. And then there's you, and I'm thinking about you right now. You left your apartment with your two little ones, and it was just hard to get here, and it's been a tough weekend. I think about that person who was up at 4 this morning, wondering how life could be derailed the way it has become derailed. And just trying to figure out which end is up and what went wrong. And then I think about the person or the couple who have only been here once or twice, and they pulled into the parking lot, and you know that feeling. You'd just as soon go down to Panera Bread and have a good cup of coffee. Go in here with all these people you don't know. And will it be awkward? I really think, and I believe this more than I ever have, I really believe when we come together like this, that if we have our hearts open and our minds open, that God does have a word for us. And the thing I love about God is He's never wrong. You know what it's like to be pushing the remote control and land on what you thought was going to be a great program, and you spend about 30 minutes with that thing, and then you go, yeah, you move on. Well, sometimes you get it wrong with the remote, but you'll never get it wrong with God. So I want you to know that regardless of what went on this morning, and regardless of what went on this week, and regardless of where you are in life right now, God is very, very, very aware of exactly what you need. Even if you're not aware of that. Isn't that something? Mark chapter 10. I need to mention that by the time we get to verse 32, we've already had 2 of these cross predictions by Jesus that He's going to go to the cross. And in fact, we're going to learn, or we could read that He will actually be resurrected. And there's another cross prediction in verses 32 through 34. Okay? And then verse 35. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to Him. Teacher, they ask, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Be careful when someone says, will you do me a favor? Well, you don't say yes, you say what? Well, what do you have in mind? What do you want me to do for you, he asked. And they replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. You don't know what you're asking, Jesus said. Can you drink the cup I drink or be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with? We can, they answered. Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup I drink and be baptized with the baptism I am baptized with. That's in fact going to happen. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. And these places belong to those for whom they have been prepared." And when the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. I mean, it is irritating when somebody beats you to the punch and they're asking for favors before you could get there and ask for yours. Jesus called them together and said, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Some of you heard this story, I would guess, the story of Brent Cunningham. Brent Cunningham on your right, who was running in the Boston Marathon recently, and he finished. And about 45 minutes later, there was the explosion. Brent is from Alaska. He is the director of he's the regional director of Young Life, which is a Christian ministry. He and his wife Karen were there at the Boston Marathon along with their 17-year-old daughter. So he finished. The volunteer put the medal around his neck. And they began to kind of make their way back the other direction. There was the explosion, all of the confusion. And the three of them are walking along, and they see a young woman seated on a curb, and she is crying. In fact, she's crying uncontrollably. Karen is a nurse, and she walked over there, took a blanket they had and put it around her shoulders and asked her if she could be helpful, and the woman continued to cry. Brent said, "I saw a young gal in need, and I wanted to be able to help her." Her name was Laura Wellington. She is a claims adjuster, 25 years old, lives in Cambridge. Brent said, "She's alone. I see that she's alone, and she's scared, and she's cold, and she didn't get to finish. And I just wanted to comfort her. So I took my medal from around my neck, and I placed it around her neck, and I said, 'You're a finisher.'" And Brent and Karen and their daughter walked away. Well, this young woman, for several days, had no idea who they were. Finally, she posted that story on Facebook. She was there crying after the explosion because her cell phone went out, and she could not reach her parents who were at the finish line, and she was scared about just what was happening. She posted that story on Facebook. The story went viral, and she came in contact with Brent and Karen, their family, who live in Alaska. And I'll finish that story in a few minutes. You're a finisher. I read that story. It was featured on 2020 shortly after the explosion. You can see a clip of it on the internet easily. Not right now. I always hesitate when I say that, and I see these faces immediately look down at that, and I'm suspecting it's a screen. Maybe later. I read that story and then I read it again. Feel-good stories are like that, aren't they? You read it and you want to read it again. I watched the 2020 interview and then I watched it again. He took the medal. He finished the Boston Marathon. First time he ever ran it, came all the way from Alaska, took his own medal, put it around the neck of a total stranger and walked away. Who does that? This story of James and John, and you've read this, I know, a lot, many times. He's got this request. When everything comes together in your glory, one of us would like to sit on the right and the other would like to sit on the left. Jesus says you don't have a clue as to what you're asking. And then he calls them all together and he says, some people think about leadership this way. That is, some who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Some people think that real leadership is bossing people around. It's hovering, it's commanding, it's getting to somehow sit on the left or the right of the big person and be in charge. Some people think of leadership as being able to exercise authority. They love to talk about their title. They love to talk about who they are. Jesus says in the kingdom, there's a whole different mentality. Whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. Whoever wants to be great must be your servant. Even the Son of Man, even Jesus, did not come to be served, but to serve, and just give his life as a ransom for many. Turn to the back of your order of worship, if you would. Ruler or servant? This is, I know we've read this and read this and read this, but this is still such a strange and bizarre text. The Creator God has come to the earth and served the very people he created. And by the way, in Islam, this is highly offensive. That the Creator God would serve those who he created. Think for a moment if we were to go to a very large banquet, very, very nice banquet. Maybe it's some sort of very, very nice benefit dinner. And they've brought in this guest speaker from the East Coast, and he's a very, very important person. We like to do that when we have these benefit dinners or of sorts. We like to bring in someone who appears to be important or someone who would draw other people to come. And here's a head table. And this guest speaker is seated at the head table along with other dignitaries, and he's eating his meal, and then he gets up, steps away from the table, down the podium, steps over to a smaller table, and picks up a pitcher of tea, and starts moving from table to table, pouring people refills. Some people look at that and go, oh wow, isn't that nice? I bet he'll somehow connect that to his talk probably, kind of weave that in somehow. And he's doing that, and he keeps doing that. And the program begins. And he's still out here walking from table to table, pouring iced tea. And several people who basically pulled this dinner together are feeling a little irritated. You know, a little bit of that was a nice touch. But we got a program, and he's going to speak in a couple of minutes, and he's back off over there pouring iced tea. I mean, a little bit of service seems okay, but let's don't carry this too far. Ruler or servant? What a text. How in the world can the King of the universe be submissive to the forces of his own creation? John Dixon, some of us have seen his videos in the Wednesday night class. John Dixon, I think it was 2 years ago, wrote a fine little book on humility. And he talks in the book about humility as it was perceived in the ancient world. And he said basically, to lower yourself before an equal was undignified. Because in the ancient world, one wanted to gain public honor for oneself and your family. Well, in listening to Jesus here, it just seems like that life is a whole lot more than who gets to sit at the head table, who gets to appear to be important. In fact, it may be that the kitchen is more important than the head table. Gene Wilkes, in a little book called Jesus on Leadership, tells the following story. He says, "One day I found myself at a head table. My job was to introduce the speaker after the musicians sang. As the speaker began his talk, everyone at the head table stood and moved to sit among those attending the conference, that is, everyone but me. The speaker, who picked up on those leaving the table, said, 'If you're at the head table and would like to move, you can at this time.' And alone, I stood and said, 'I'd love to.' And we all laughed, and I walked red-faced to sit at a table with those who served in the kitchen. From head table to kitchen worker status, I had been demoted in front of my peer group. As I reflected on my social blunder and the speaker's words about leadership, I realized that I had done what was typical of many who sit at head tables. When given a position, we happily accept the status that goes with it and somehow believe we no longer need to go near the attention. I think this guy understands status. I was suffering from head table mentality. I had accepted the myth that those who sit at the head table are somehow more important than those who serve in the kitchen. Move on to there you go. I even had perpetuated the myth that by non-verbally resisting a place among the servers, I wondered if the people in my church suffered from this same mentality. I realized that we who lead often overlook the fact that the true place of Christ-like leadership is out in the crowd rather than up at the head table. People who follow Christ's model of leadership would never be embarrassed to find themselves among the kitchen help. Such a leader is comfortable working with those who serve in the background and gladly works beside them until they complete the job. Head tables are optional for leaders who follow Jesus. Service, not status, is the goal of this kind of leader. Let's talk for a moment about what gets in the way of serving people. Well, first of all, I got to tell you that up to this point, there's not a whole lot offensive about serving people, right? We talk about that in business. We talk about that in various disciplines. That is just language we use in church all the time. Make me a servant. We sing all that, you know. You just need to serve and go sign up at the back. There's a list back there for the big deal coming up, and just, you know, we need servants, and we say all of that, and nobody bristles, nobody feels on edge. We don't feel on edge until somebody suggests that there might be a collision between self-centeredness and service. That there might be a collision between me wanting to sit on the right or the left of the important guy and in service. Because somehow in my thick skull I think, why in the world can I not be a Christ follower and basically do what I want and get what I want? Let's go out to eat. Where are we going? Mexican. Mexican? We had Mexican the other night. Last thing I want to do is go eat Mexican food. Well, let's just do what you want, big boy, because it's all about you or girl or whoever you are. I get that. I know how to think that way. I keep thinking in my thick skull that life works when I get what I want. I'll serve, mind you, but I want to get what I want. I want it to go my way. I want church to be the way I want it to be. And we're all for, I'm just all for church. I'm all for all these activities, as long as we kind of do it, the way I think we ought to do it. What gets in the way of serving? Number one is anger. Anger. And sometimes my anger makes me feel entitled to something better. Could you help us out? I have put in my time with that a long time ago. I'm done with that. And it is interesting to see adults in our 40s and 50s. I'm sorry, I should have pointed to myself at 40s, but in our 40s and 50s and on. It's interesting to see us sometimes, and you just kind of wonder, where's all that anger come from? And it is awfully hard to think about being a servant. Listen to what Jesus said. Look at your text again, if you would. The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life, to give it up. To give his life as a ransom for many. Number two, some of us find it very difficult to serve people because of ego. Somebody said, and I cannot remember who said this, somebody said that ego is basically edging God out instead of exalting God only. Ego. Y'all know any experts? Y'all know anyone who's an expert in most everything? Don't look at them. But you know somebody like that? Oh yeah, I can tell you all about that. That's how that works, and just kind of wander off in that car. You looking for a car? Oh yeah, I saw a special the other day. I'll tell you all about that. A Bible? Oh yeah, I read this book on Greek 40 years ago, and I kind of figured out those. And there are people, so much of that is just. You don't hear those people say, "I'm learning. I'm trying to understand. I don't know. I don't know." No, they know all about it. And a lot of that is rooted not in knowledge, but ego. Here's a third one. Sometimes it's hard to serve because of pride. So sometimes somebody gets up on a Sunday morning and we go on and on about a certain ministry, and I find myself sitting in a pew with my arms closed. They never highlight my ministry. They never talk about what we're doing. Nobody never goes on and on about our deal. Nobody ever says my name. Nobody ever, and that's sort of ego that says, I ought to get credit for this. I ought to get the proper attention for this. Here's a fourth one. Some of us have difficulty serving people because of fear. So we hide behind our roles or positions. Y'all ever worked for anybody who just would not admit they made a mistake? You ever worked for anybody like that? I mean, there's always somebody to blame. There's always some department to blame. There's a supervisor to blame. There's this mythical something out there to blame. And you just think, I don't think I've ever heard that person say, I made a mistake. I messed it up. I goofed again. A lot of that's rooted in ego. Now, kind of wrap this up. This is an invitation here by Jesus to join him in serving, okay? There's a fine little book by David Platt, P-L-A-T-T, entitled Radical, Taking Back Your Faith from the American Dream. The title alone may interest you. Platt writes, ultimately, Jesus was calling them to abandon themselves. They were leaving certainty for uncertainty, safety for danger, self-preservation for self-denunciation. In a world that prizes promoting oneself, they were following a teacher who told them to crucify themselves. So here are a couple of challenges. I think one challenge is beware of how you define greatness. Beware of how you define greatness. Years ago, I was asking a friend of mine who had done a lot of work in encouraging ministers and encouraging other church leaders. I asked him one time, I said, could you tell me the very best ministers, preachers that you've known? And I loved his answer. He laughed and he said, you wouldn't know most of them. Then he went on to say, he said, so many of the really good people that I've known serve in relative obscurity. Sometimes people seem to be very important because of a title, and that's fine. Or a position, and that's fine. Or because of a role, and that's fine. But the truth is, those people, along with the rest of us, are called to serve. All of us are called to serve, whether we serve in very public roles or relative obscurity in terms of what the world might see. But I need to beware when I define greatness as being visible in public. I remember watching television one time, and I kept hearing this name over and over and over and over and over. And it was just some celebrity. And finally, somebody said this about this particular person, said she is basically famous for being famous. There's been no contribution. She's not built an orphanage in Africa. She's just famous for being famous, and so people keep talking about her, and then other people keep talking about her. I think if I'll keep my eyes open, I might realize that there are people who are living significant lives whose names will never be public and visible, and who will never seem all that important, but their lives are significant. Well, here are two challenges. I think number one, I need to ask myself, am I here to be served, or am I here to serve? And where does all of this fit into my self-centeredness? I mean, when I'm at home, I remember being at home one time, and there were 3 people in the living room watching television. 3 people in the living room watching television, while one person was in the kitchen making our dinner. Two of these people happened to be my daughters. I happened to be the third one. And I'm in there with the recliner reared back while my daughters are doing, basically just watching Dad, just kind of copying Dad. They're reared back. And then I remember I called out, "What are we having?" Well, we're having whatever she said. And then I heard her say something like, "Could use a little help." And I thought, this is really good. You preach about serving, and then you act like at home sometimes that you're here to be served. I don't know if that rings a bell or not. Some of you just got a sharp elbow. But what I'm getting at is, if you could think of examples in your life like that. And you know what I'm saying? We don't even think about that sometimes. We just go into automatic. But I might want to be, forget the might. We need to be thinking about ways that we act like we're entitled, ways that we act like we're here to be served. Guys, when you go up to your parents and you want something, you kind of act like they owe it to you. Or sometimes we do that with husbands and wives. I was talking one time about the importance of thanking people who wait on us in restaurants. And I remember some guy said, "Well, why should I thank them? They're getting paid." You don't get this. Listen, this is not about entitlement. This is about what it means to live out a Christ-like life. So bottom line, we'll either be self-serving or servant leaders. Self-serving or servant leaders. Okay, and I'll tell you, the most natural inclination I think this would be true for most of us, our most natural inclination is to be self-serving. I want what I want, and I want it to go the way I want it to go. And Jesus is saying, that is not the life I'm calling you to. Okay? So this week, if we could be thinking about, during the week, what are the ways that we keep going back, maybe a deep rut, to this self-centered, these expectations? And what are some ways that I can serve people, not just special projects at church, but the way I treat Charlotte and my children and people around me? Does that make sense? Could we work with that this week? I think this is real important because we're talking about Jesus calling us. And I believe he's calling us to be servants, but it rubs up against our self-centeredness. Let's go to the last one. ABC's 2020 heard this wonderful story. Heard this wonderful story about Brent Cunningham and Laura Wellington. When they heard about it, Brent was already in Alaska. Laura had written the Facebook post that went viral, and then somebody somehow saw that Facebook post that knew who it was and connected all these dots. And 2020 said to Brent, "We want to fly you back to the East Coast and appear on 2020 and meet Laura." And he did. He flew from Alaska back to the East Coast and met Laura and her family, and they had dinner on a Thursday evening. Brent said when he saw her, when he saw Laura coming near him, he saw her pull out a medal. He saw her pull out a medal. And Brent said to her, "Laura Wellington, you listen to me. I do not want my medal back. That was my gift to you." And she said, "Oh no, this is not your medal. What you didn't know was a couple of hours later, I got a medal when I went and got my stuff from the marathon. I want to keep your medal, and I want you to have my medal." And that medal was given to him. And it was a gracious moment. It was a gracious moment when he gave her his medal. But I'm going to tell you, I think it was just as gracious when he reminded her that she was a finisher. This is the deal. Lots of us grow up and become adults, and we decide who the winners are and who the losers are, and who are just kind of in between. It often starts when they're younger than you guys are in high school. You look in the mirror and you don't like what you see. You look in the mirror and you love what you see. You go out for football, man, they're saying you're great. You're going to be in the NFL by the 11th grade. I mean, they're just, you're kind of, and your parents are talking that way. Oh, you're special. Or NBA for you. I mean, you're just kind of, and boy, you begin to kind of think. And then others are going, I can't dribble a ball. I don't know how to play an instrument. I'm an average student. So then we'll leave you alone. You grow up. Some go to college, some don't. Some go to graduate school, some don't. Some get very much higher degrees, some don't. Oh, and then some begin to make a good amount of money. We leave that charming little house we left in one time, and we're in a better house. In the meantime, some of us are struggling in a house that there's always something wrong with it, and how do you ever make all the ends meet? And some of these people go on these big vacations, and I don't think we can get to Fredericksburg for 2 days. And how does all that work? And then you come over here, and the kids are growing up, and here come the Facebook post. So thankful for my children. She's trying to decide between Harvard and Yale, and just all, and yours. You just hope yours stays out of jail. Now there's the laughter by some of you. Others of you, that's very real to you. You know what it is to have a child on drugs. You can't figure out how your friend's daughter could marry this guy, and they end up with these awesome kids and this great marriage, and your daughter married this wonderful guy, and he cuts out on her and the kids. As long as we gauge ourselves by the standards of this world, we will always be thinking in terms of who is winning and who is losing. But the greatest is a servant. We all can be finishers in Christ. It is not about how much money you have or where you live or how much education you've got or how beautiful you are, how handsome you are, how athletic you are. It is all about what Christ has done for you. Amen? Amen. Act like we believe this. Amen? Amen. It is all about what He has done for us. Finishers. That's why you can be an older person, and instead of turning into an old grouch, You can become a person who continues to serve even in your suffering, because you have your eyes on something higher than you. And you can look in the mirror and know your ears aren't what they, but you're more than your looks. That's good news. Let's sing for a moment. If you want to pray with our shepherds, I encourage you to pray with them. If you want to be baptized for the forgiveness of sins and you've been thinking about this, I encourage you to do this and we'll assist you with it. Let's stand together and sing. Lord, like you.